A fiancé, the person you promised to marry. I once had a fiancé, but I wasn't going to live with him because of my sister. I was in the depths of despair at that time, but now I found new happiness. I want to make that clear to my sister and my ex-fiancé. My name is Emma. I'm not particularly beautiful, and I'm just a normal office worker. Back then, I had someone I promised to marry. His name was Mike. Mike was a handsome man who worked at a well-known company, and he was known as the good-looking guy. We were so happy back then, I thought that this happiness would last forever. But reality confronted me with a cruel result. I couldn't get married to Mike, and the reason was because of my sister. My sister's name is Evelyn. Evelyn has been interested in fashion since she was young. Even now, she still loves fashion. In fact, Evelyn was always concerned about her appearance and was always beautiful. Therefore, Evelyn has been popular amongst the guys since junior high school. She even modeled for a fashion magazine once. That experience made Evelyn dream of becoming a model. When I graduated from university and started working for an ordinary company, I was invited to dinner by a business partner. That partner was Mike. After exchanging contact with Mike several times and occasionally going out to eat, something happened one day. That day, after work, Mike invited me to dinner. Of course, I had no reason to refuse, so I went out to eat. On the way home that day, Mike confessed his feelings for me. I was surprised by his sudden confession, but I was also attracted to Mike, so we started dating. So 1 year after I started dating Mike, he proposed to me. I was so happy at the time. Of course, I accepted the proposal. Later, Mike and I went to my parents' house to report and greet them. My parents were, of course, overjoyed. We talked about the wedding and I was happy. But there was someone who wasn't happy. That was my sister, Evelyn. Evelyn was very surprised to see that I was getting married and who my partner was. Evelyn, who was more beautiful than me and often had men asking her out, always looked down on me because I didn't have much experience in relationships. I don't want my friends to know about how uncool my sister is. That was Evelyn's catchphrase. The uncool sister, whom she looked down on, was getting married before her, and to an elite businessman from a major company. That seemed to hurt Evelyn's pride even more, but I was completely unaware of Evelyn's feelings. I should have noticed Evelyn's attitude at the time. Suddenly, Evelyn asked Mike, "If you're going to be my brother-in-law, can we exchange contact information?" Mike and I had no reason to refuse, so we happily agreed. There were days when I was working late on handover tasks as I was planning to quit my job. And one day, when my parents were out of town on a trip, Evelyn took a certain action. In hindsight, it must have been a plan she had thought of from the beginning. Once I quit my job, I would move out of my parents' house and start living with Mike. So she probably wanted to execute her plan while I was still at home. First, Evelyn called Mike over to her house. "Mike, my sister suddenly came home because she got sick. My parents are out on a trip, and I'm scared to be alone. Can you come over?" Evelyn lied that I had come home early from work due to a sudden illness. Mike was just about to go home from work, so he hurried over to her house without suspecting about anything.
"I heard Emma was suddenly sick, so I rushed over. Where's Emma?"
Of course, I wasn't there. It's only natural for Mike to think that. But Evelyn said, "I'm sorry, Mike. I lied to you. My sister isn't actually sick. She's still at work." Upon hearing this, Mike didn't get angry at Evelyn but asked,
"Why did you lie like that?"
I just really needed to talk to you, Mike." And so, Evelyn started to talk. When I finished work and got home, I was surprised. It was because Mike was there. But I didn't expect anything and was carefree, saying, "Oh, you're here." Then later, I was to experience the greatest despair and sadness I had ever felt in my life.
Emma, I'm sorry. I want us to break up.
It was too sudden. I couldn't quite grasp the meaning of his words. Eh? You're kidding, right? Break up? What do you mean? As I was questioning Mike, Evelyn appeared.
Emma, the truth is, I'm dating Evelyn. I'm sorry, Emma. I fell in love with Evelyn more than you.
While I was still confused and couldn't believe it, Evelyn said this. I'm sorry, but Mike and I are going to get married. I didn't understand what was happening. Then Evelyn continued. You might not want to come to our wedding, but at least come to the reception. After that, all I could do was cry. My fiancé was taken by Evelyn, and I was not wanted anymore. Both my father and mother were very worried. For a while, I couldn't leave my room. Since I had already resigned from my job, I had nothing to do. I received several messages from my colleagues at work asking when the wedding would be. I told them that we had decided to have a simple wedding with only our families. A few months later, I was in an unfamiliar place. I'm going to start my life with a new beginning from here. I want to be happy again. This time, for sure. After breaking up with Mike, I had been shut in for a while, but a certain emotion was born in me. Why do I have to go through this? I'll forget about that man and start over again. From there, things moved quickly. I talked to my father and mother and decided to leave home and live on my own, living in a completely unknown place. But it's a very comfortable place with lots of green and tranquility. My parents didn't try to stop me, and they helped me a lot when I moved. After moving in and taking a break from the move, I heard the story from my mother. A few days after you shut yourself in your room, Mike came. I heard everything that happened between you and Mike. And then she apologized in the end. I didn't understand why my parents were apologizing.
Of course, what Mike did is unforgivable. His parents came to apologize too. They even got on their knees to apologize. But you see, we also heard about Evelyn. We know you can't forgive her, but Evelyn is our precious daughter too. My parents told me. Both my father and mother had been troubled about what happened. Mike did something terrible to their own daughter. It's only natural that they could not forgive such a person like him. But despite what my parents said to her, it seems that Evelyn had gone to Mike. Since then, Mike had been coming to the house at the same time every day apologizing and asking them to accept his marriage to Evelyn. My parents had no choice but to accept Mike's actions. So that's why they apologized to me for acknowledging their marriage. Honestly, I didn't care anymore, but I understood my parents' feelings all too well. It's over now, it's okay. Besides, I'm going to meet someone even more wonderful from now on. I answered positively, holding back the tears that were about to fall. My mother was crying. My father had a remorseful look on his face, but he responded with a smile when I said, When I have a child, I'll rely on you both a lot. If anything happens, don't overdo it and contact us right away. My mother was very worried. Once I got used to my new life and had some peace of mind, I started working at a certain restaurant. It was a small restaurant with only a few employees, but it was very bright, and I really liked the friendly atmosphere everyone had. The manager's name was Noah, and he was always being teased by the part-timers. How they teased Noah was interesting, and it was very peaceful to watch. A few months after I started working, a fateful event that would affect my future occurred. Noah confessed his feelings to me. It was after the shop had closed, and he was giving me a ride home. I was honestly torn. Noah is a very good person, and above all, he is kind. His personality and looks are both so good that he is popular among women. But I was still haunted by that incident. I was scared I might be abandoned again. Perhaps Noah sensed my situation because he said that he didn't need an immediate answer and left that day.
Things were a bit awkward for a while, but thanks to the usual interactions with the part-timers and the kind Noah, I didn't worry too much. Perhaps my heart had already made up its mind. At that time, I learned something about Noah during a break. It turns out that Noah had been betrayed by someone he was dating, and had a terrible experience at the place he worked before this shop. Noah was the same as me. He had a past of being betrayed by someone he loved. That day, I decided to go home with Noah to hear his story. While we were walking home together, Noah told me his story. In fact, Noah had been in charge of a store before he came here. However, due to a certain incident, the store lost its credibility and had to close. And Noah was held responsible and got fired. After hearing his story, I decided to tell Noah why I came to this place. After the talk, Noah said,
"You did well."
Despite the difficulties, I stood up and looked forward again, and he said such gentle words to me. I was happy, and I realized that this was what I really wanted to hear. That I did well. I was betrayed by the person I loved and had a difficult time, but I got over it. Honestly, it was very hard. And I told Noah, "You did well too." And to this, Noah was smiling. And then I responded to his confession that day. "I'm like this, but I hope we can get along well." After that, I was teased more than ever by the part-timers at the shop, but I was really happy. "Congratulations! Wishing you both on your happiness for a long time."
It's too early for that line.
If you say it's too early, that means there will be a time, right? Then I'll say it again at that time.
Make sure you let me say it, okay? Otherwise I won't forgive you. Well...
Noah seemed a bit flustered. I was laughing. Everyone was laughing. I was really happy. Then one day, after so many days had passed, I received a proposal for the second time in my life. Of course, I accepted the proposal. I had the determination to be happy this time and believed that I could definitely be happy with Noah. And then I went to see my parents for the first time in a while. They were very happy. When I told them that I had told Noah everything, my parents said, "Please make our daughter happy."
"I will definitely make Emma happy,"
he answered clearly and confidently. We talked for a while, but then my father hesitantly said,
"It seems that Evelyn and Mike are going to have a wedding ceremony."
They might send an invitation, but my parents told me I didn't have to push myself. But I didn't care anymore, because I'm happy now. In fact, I wanted to show off my current happiness. When I told my parents that, they said, "If you say so, Emma. Noah, we're counting on you if anything happens." A few days later, I received a wedding invitation from Evelyn. Of course, I decided to attend. I wrote that we would be coming together. Noah and I, knowing that Evelyn was going to have a wedding ceremony, had already registered our marriage. Because we thought that it would be a burden on our parents and relatives if we had wedding ceremonies after wedding ceremonies. We swore to have a wedding ceremony when things calmed down. On the day of Evelyn's wedding, Noah and I were heading to the venue together. It was a long-awaited reunion with Evelyn and Mike, but somehow, Mike looked a little worn out. And at the family introduction, I introduced Noah to him, saying, "This is my husband Noah. He is my pride and joy." When I introduced Noah, for some reason, Evelyn looked really surprised, which was quite memorable. On the other hand, I had something I really wanted to ask Mike. I wanted to ask about what had happened with him and Evelyn on that day when my parents and I were not there. At first, Mike seemed to have a hard time talking about it, but gradually he began to speak about it. On the day he was called by Evelyn, Mike, who found out that I was seriously ill, seemed to have decided to wait for me. Then, Evelyn brought some alcohol, really strong ones, saying that it was a good opportunity and offered it to him. Mike, who is not very good at drinking, seems to have gotten drunk after drinking about 2 cups. And Evelyn, seeing this as a good opportunity, started to seduce him. Mike, too, was drunk and lost his ability to judge properly, and ended up going along with the temptation. Evelyn is attractive. She has a good figure, and I guess it's natural for a normal man to be tempted by such a woman. But Mike and I were engaged. Nevertheless, Mike was seduced and began to get conscious of Evelyn. After telling me this story, Mike apologized many times, but at that moment, he looked very small to me. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. I was satisfied just to hear the truth. Meanwhile, Noah and Evelyn were also talking about something. I was curious, but since it was almost time for Evelyn's wedding ceremony, I decided to ask later. Then, on the way home, I asked Noah again. Didn't you seem a bit angry when you were talking to Evelyn?
I told you before, but actually she's the one who cheated on me when we were dating. Not only that, but she is also the reason why I was fired from the shop where I used to work.
I was very surprised. It's a small world, isn't it? And I was even more surprised to learn that she was the reason why Noah's shop had to close. I decided to ask him for more details. Apparently, Evelyn had been having an affair with a certain designer a few months after she started dating Noah. It seems that Evelyn, although dating Noah, thought it would be more convenient for her future to date someone in the industry to become a model. Noah, who accidentally found out about this, naturally got angry with Evelyn. However, Evelyn got angry at Noah and in return, they broke up. But Evelyn, who was still angry, created a fake photo of the food she had taken at Noah's restaurant, which had a foreign object in the food, and spread it around on social media. At that time, Evelyn was also an amateur model and had quite a number of followers on her social media, and the photo had quickly went viral. It also caught the eye of the boss who had entrusted the shop to Noah, and because the sales started to decrease, the shop was closed. Then Noah was held responsible and was fired. Naturally, Noah felt bitter because of what had happened. However, since he didn't know who the perpetrator was, he had nowhere to direct his anger. In the midst of this, he found out the truth when a friend of his invited him for a drink. His friend's girlfriend knew someone who knew Evelyn, and from that friend, he was shown a conversation about how a certain restaurant disappeared due to what Evelyn spread on social media. Of course, his friend did not know that the restaurant that disappeared was Noah's restaurant. Noah, who found the culprit in an unexpected place, couldn't do anything about it anymore, so he decided to start over alone in a different place. That's where he met me. I apologized to Noah. I'm sorry my sister did such a terrible thing. I'm the sister of the person who messed up Noah's life. I didn't know what to do. I seriously thought that Noah might hate me, but Noah said,
"It's a thing of the past, and it's not your fault, Emma."
I was honestly relieved, and we decided once again to be happy together. Later on, Evelyn finally got her punishment. The place Evelyn visited for a photo shoot when she decided to do a gravure shoot. That place was none other than the place where we live at the moment. Surely, with all the greenery here, one could take nice photos. Evelyn seemed to be thinking of becoming a model using this experience in gravure shoot as a stepping stone. The incident happened at a restaurant which she visited for a meal. The restaurant was, in fact, Noah's restaurant. I had already stopped working at Noah's restaurant, so I heard about this later on. As soon as they entered the restaurant, both Noah and Evelyn recognized each other. Immediately, Noah said,
"I'm sorry, I can't allow you to enter the restaurant,"
and refused their entry. Naturally, the photo shoot staff members were angry and asked for an explanation. Noah explained everything that Evelyn had done in the past and what he had gone through because of her.
"She has a criminal record, and there is solid evidence. I don't want to go through the same thing again, so I don't want her to enter my restaurant."
It seemed she couldn't say anything back to that, and Evelyn also turned pale. Furthermore, Noah said that he would tell the president of the company where Evelyn was about to join all about her past. The person who recruited Evelyn was surprised upon hearing the story, and he asked Evelyn to quit, but Noah couldn't control his anger. In the end, Evelyn lost the gravure shoot deal. and the news of her past incidents spread in the industry, crushing her dream of becoming a model. No one would want to deal with someone who had caused such a huge scandal in the past. Moreover, I heard from my mother that Mike's company performance had been deteriorating recently, and he was now a candidate for a demotion. It seems that even my mother was worried about what would happen to these two in the future. Despite such an incident, Noah and I continue to live happily every day. And today is our long-awaited wedding day. Both Noah and I have had difficult times in the past, but now we are very happy. Inside my belly, there was also a new life growing. Congratulations! I wish you both happiness for many years to come. Colleagues from the restaurant where we met were saying a line I've heard before, while they laughed to us. Thank you. And then Noah and I swore in front of everyone that we would always cherish our family and always be happy.
I witnessed my husband's affair. I believe such experiences are rare. Most people confront their husbands after finding evidence of infidelity on their smartphones, but I happened to see it with my own eyes. Never did I imagine that it would be in such a place, witnessed by so many people. Sure, I had felt suspicious about the relationship for a while, but I never expected to see my husband doing that in such a place. I'm Sophia, a full-time homemaker with a 6-year-old son. On the day I witnessed the affair, my husband was off work, and we planned to go out as a family, but when I woke up, my husband was already gone. There was a message on my smartphone from my husband saying, "My sister has a high fever of 39 degrees, so I'm going to take care of her. It seems that no one is at home today. I'll be back in the evening." I let out a big sigh. I had told our son that we were going to the amusement park today, and he had been looking forward to it since the day before. I was told that my husband was recently put in charge of a major project, and he hadn't been able to take a break for the past 6 months. So this break was a rare chance for some family time, but he ended up going to take care of his sick sister. His sister is supposed to be engaged, so it should be fine to leave it to him. Anyway, my husband is a sister complex. The reason why I started dating him was because he said, "You're wonderful because you're like my sister," which made me feel uneasy. Well, his sister was very beautiful and kind when I met her for the pre-wedding greeting, and I guess that resembling her is the highest compliment from my husband. But I couldn't help but feel creeped out. My husband used to say, "I want a boy and a girl," and frequently asked for sex, but since our son was born, the frequency has significantly decreased. Now it's almost non-existent. We're still young, and my husband used to enjoy sex, so I can't help but suspect that he's doing with other women or that he's cheating. Well, if he just betrayed me, I could still forgive him. It's infuriating though, but the problem is that he disappears from morning every day on his days off, like today. On his days off, he could at least play with the kid once in a while, couldn't he? Our child is such a daddy's boy that he cries when he realizes his father is not around. My husband is too indifferent towards our child. He doesn't even prepare a birthday present, and he doesn't participate in school events, no matter how free he is. Even when he comes home early occasionally, he just holes up in his room and plays video games all the time. He hardly ever faces our son. Our son, who used to be a daddy's boy, will probably start to see his father as a stranger if this continues. Oh, and the part about my husband being busy because he was put in charge of a major project was a lie. I mean, he hardly ever comes home, so I once asked a former classmate who works at the same company as my husband, "Is my husband really that busy?" My classmate laughed and told me, "No way, your husband is actually a Windows side employee, and he always looks free because he has no work. He leaves work on time every day." I thought, I knew it. After all, despite supposedly being put in charge of a major project, his salary is only in the 200,000 yen range, and he never looked tired from working overtime. In fact, he looked rather glossy. This is also a factor that makes me suspect his infidelity. Despite harboring a lot of dissatisfaction, I finished preparing breakfast. I check the time and tilt my head. This is strange. Usually he wakes up by 7 o'clock even if I don't wake him, but it's already past that time. At this rate, he will miss the bus to the nursery school, so I hurriedly went to wake up my son. In the room, my son was still sleeping, and when I tried to wake him up saying, "It's morning, wake up!" instead of a response, I heard a groan of pain. As I worried, I reached out to my son's painful face and put my hand on his forehead. It was very hot. I called my son's name and lightly shook his shoulder. Barely opening his eyes, my son said, "Mom, it hurts." I was almost panicked for a moment. Around this time, there was an outbreak of that illness at the daycare center, and I wondered if my son had caught it too. I had heard that there were cases where people died from it, so I seriously thought my son might not make it. In desperation, I called my husband, but he didn't answer at all. With no time to wait for a reply to an email, I decided to call my mother and ask for first aid advice. My mother is a nurse, so I thought it would be best to ask an expert. Under my mother's precise instructions, I quickly prepared a cold compress and measured my son's temperature. It was over 39 degrees Celsius. I called an ambulance and made sure my son to drink a lot of fluids while waiting for it to arrive. According to my mother, there was also a possibility of heat stroke. Considering the risk of infection, I wasn't allowed to accompany him in the ambulance, so I called a taxi and headed to the hospital where he would be taken. In the meantime, I kept calling my husband, even though I knew it was futile. As expected, it was pointless. With no other choice, I left a message online. I figured he would come as soon as he noticed, assuming he was still responsible enough to do so while out in his car. I arrived at the hospital and prayed as I waited in the corridor outside the emergency room for my son's treatment to finish. My father had once been taken into the emergency room just like this, and he never came out. Just as I was imagining the worst, thinking, what if my son doesn't come out either? My mother, who had rushed to the hospital, comforted me. "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And then, an hour later, my son miraculously survived. But he was told that he should be hospitalized for at least a week, so he was taken straight to a ward. In the end, my husband didn't come home that day. The next day, I went home to get my son's change of clothes, and I decided to visit him in the hospital with some fruit for him to eat. I also planned to say hello to the doctor who had taken care of us the day before, so I passed by the emergency room. Suddenly, the area became hectic. I thought, maybe someone was brought in, so I decided to postpone saying hello to the doctor so as not to be in the way. Just as I thought I was about to go to my son's ward, I saw a man and a woman being carried on a stretcher. They were barely covered with a thin blanket, almost as if they were naked. It seems like they were still joined together. It must be one of those situations where the man's thing can't come out during the act. I've never experienced it, but it must be quite troublesome. But being carried in this state must be embarrassing. As I was thinking this and about to pass by, I made eye contact with the man. Under normal circumstances, it would be an awkward situation, but for me, it was different. I was stunned, because the man was my husband. Why are you here like this?" I exclaimed in surprise.
"No, well, I caught my sister's cold, so,
My husband was at loss for words. At that moment, I was also confused. My son had just been taken here yesterday, and now my husband too? What are the odds of that happening? And why was my husband being carried in naked? And who is the woman with him? All sorts of thoughts were whirling around in my head. In the midst of all this, I accidentally make eye contact with the woman who is intertwined with my husband. Even in my state of confusion, I can tell. This woman is my husband's mistress. As I glared at her, I realized that her face was very familiar. Why is Sophia here?" Hearing her voice, I finally remembered. Yes, that woman was Amelia, my husband's sister. I felt this moment is incredibly long. I suspected my husband was lying about taking care of his sister and meeting a woman instead, but I never expected this. Even if he was coming to visit our son, he should not have come while still joined with the woman. But the woman is his real sister? There are limits to how much one can mess around. Because they were taken away on a stretcher, all I could do was hold back my urge to lunge at them and wait. They couldn't escape anyway, so I decided to confront them later. With that thought in mind, I headed to visit my son, still feeling sick deep down. I spent some time in my son's room trying to sort out my feelings. When I casually checked my phone, I saw a ton of messages from my husband online. Looking at the content, it was all just him trying to cover up his actions. He didn't even mention our son's hospitalization. I decided to keep ignoring him and waited another hour. Then the doctor who had been in charge of my son the day before appeared. The doctor smiled at me and said,
"Your son is doing very well. He might be able to be discharged earlier than expected. His fever had come down, and his condition seemed to have completely stabilized."
Initially, I was worried about an infectious disease, but it seems he had heat stroke in addition to the cold.
"You made sure he drank a lot of water, didn't you? That was the right move. You're a smart mother, and your son must be happy."
He even praised me that much. If anything, it's thanks to my mother. Maybe I'll give her some high-quality meat next time. I deeply bowed to the kind doctor and expressed my gratitude. but it wasn't hard to imagine that I was about to face quite a storm. I had just been relieved about my son's condition, but I was beginning to boil inside. Mommy's face is scary. I had frightened my son. I quickly put on a smile and told my son, "I'll be right back," before stepping outside the hospital and calling my husband, who had left more than 100 unanswered calls. The moment my husband answered the phone, he started,
"It's not what you think. There's a reason."
And he started making excuses. He's got the order wrong. Shouldn't he first be worried about our son? Well, there's no way a man who was so engrossed in his act with his own sister, completely disregarding our son, would worry about him. With a husband like this, I was worried about my son's future. As I didn't think my husband's personality could improve, I decided to divorce him. I think life will be tough, but for my son's sake, I can endure it, right? I told him, "You were busy with that, even when our son was suffering, right? You've always been doing that whenever you had the time, haven't you? And with your own sister, it's really disgusting." My husband was at loss for words. I continued, "Oh, and by the way, I've already reported this to your parents. I won't tell your company. It would be a problem if you can't pay alimony and child support. So goodbye," I said to my husband, expressing my finality. 3 days later. My son's health recovered faster than expected, so after completing the discharge procedures, we returned home together for the first time in a long time. Of course, my husband wasn't there. After the commotion, my husband showed up to apologize directly, but I showed the divorce papers already signed in his face. My husband begged,
"It was my first time. Forgive me for one mistake. You're all I have."
But I coldly told him, "So you're still lying at this point. I already know everything. Your sister confessed everything." Yes, I anticipated that my husband wouldn't easily agree to a divorce, so to silence him, I first approached his sister, the person involved. "Sister-in-law, I heard you're going to have a wedding ceremony with your boyfriend soon. Congrats." Thank you." I was thinking of sending a congratulatory message, and a good idea came to mind. Want to know what it is? No way. You're not planning to talk about this, are you?" "Yes, because I want everyone to know. They'll understand what kind of person you are at once if I tell them this." I smiled slyly. "Please, anything okay, but not that. If you do that, my life will be over." I pretended to think for a moment and then continued with a smile. Can't be helped. Then let's do this. I'll keep quiet about this matter if you tell me in detail how many times you did it with my husband. Then I promise to keep quiet. Of course, your younger brother will feel betrayed, but what will you do?" Then, without hesitation, my sister-in-law confessed everything, begging, "I'll tell you everything, just please don't tell him." When I told my husband this, he fainted from the shock of being betrayed by the sister he loved more than anyone else. After waking up, my husband signed the divorce papers and left the house dejectedly. From then on, through my lawyer, I demanded a divorce custody of our son, alimony, and child support from him. He haggled over the amount, but when I whispered in his ear, "Would you like me to spill the beans to your company?" he said,
"All right, I will pay the amount you said,"
and left the lawyer's office. Later, for some reason, the company found out about what happened, and my husband was summoned and severely reprimanded. A month later, he was fired from the company, and now he works at a food factory, putting strawberries on cakes to pay the alimony and child support. Somehow, the factory also knows about what he did, and he seems to be constantly gossiped about by young girls, making him uncomfortable. As for my husband's sister, despite the fact that I didn't expose her, everything came out and she was dumped by her fiancé. It seems that the boyfriend, like me, suspected infidelity and had hired a private investigator to conduct a surveillance. She was demanded a large sum of money as compensation for breaking off the engagement, and now she seems to be working at a nightclub. Also, the other day, I was given a photo of them in the act by her ex-boyfriend saying,
"Use it if something happens."
I wondered what kind of nerve he had to give such a thing to a woman like me, but I decided to keep it in my dresser. I'll gratefully use it as a precaution in case I get a message from my ex-husband or something happens. I moved back to my parents' home to start fresh, and I'm working hard to raise my son with their help. Since my parents lived far away, they had been longing to see their grandson and told me they would help as much as they could. I don't want to overburden them, so I guess I'll only ask for their help when I need it. By the way, my son, as if his high fever at the time was a lie, has been healthy ever since, and now, 3 years later, he is always recognized for perfect attendance. He seems to have completely forgotten about his real father and is enjoying his life every day. This is what makes me happiest. Oh, by the way, I have a new family member. It's a white cat named Snow who is comfortably sleeping on my lap. It was when I said my final goodbye to Snow, who often came to play in my yard before I moved. Just as usual, it climbed onto my lap and then became as still as a stone Buddha. I was also lonely to leave Snow behind, so I decided to bring it home with me. Now, Snow is a good friend to my parents and my family home, and it has become just as important to me as my son. From now on, I want to warmly watch my son's growth along with my parents and Snow. I thought about this while stroking Snow on the porch.
I divorced my husband because he cheated behind my back 3 years ago. He cheated on me with my younger sister. They sent me the invitation letter for their wedding. My mother also said that she'll attend the ceremony. I felt my mother also had betrayed me. Then to me, she said this: "I'll do something fun. You just wait and see." She had a plan to punish the two of them. My name is Emma. My husband and I worked in the same company, and I was his boss. He was a little unreliable, but he was sincere and friendly. I was in charge of his training and teaching him the ropes of the job. At first, he was nervous about the unfamiliar work, but gradually we grew close.
Emma, are you free on our next day off?
I was surprised when he asked me out on a date, but I was thrilled to see how manly he was, then how he was in the office, which made my heart skip a beat. Since then, we often went out together.
Emma, will you be my girlfriend?
6 months after we officially started dating, he was able to handle his work all by himself.
He has truly become an asset to our company.
I was as happy as if it were my own accomplishment when he was praised by other bosses at work. He then got promoted and transferred to a different department. And that's when he proposed to me.
Emma, I want you to marry me.
Yes, I'd be happy to. My parents and younger sister, Kate, immediately liked Liam, and our wedding proceeded smoothly. Especially Kate, who was the same age as Liam, got along well with him right away. "Ah, you are so lucky to marry a kind man like Liam. And it looks like people at work has high expectations from him, right?" She had just broken up with her boyfriend, seemed to be yearning for marriage, and kept expressing how jealous she was of me. After our wedding, I continued working and taking care of household chores, supporting Liam both at work and in our personal lives. Well, at least I thought I was supporting him. About a year after our marriage, he started coming home later and later, and we hardly ever had dinner together. "Hey Liam, we haven't talked about work lately. Is everything okay?"
Nothing's wrong.
"But you've been coming home late every day. If there's anything I can do to help..."
There isn't.
"Is that so?" He used to talk to me about everything, but lately he seemed annoyed when I brought up work. On his days off, he'd either sleep all day, claiming he was tired, or go out to clear his head. Feeling that we hadn't been spending any quality time together, I made a suggestion to Liam. "Hey Liam, how about we go to a spa together during next month's holiday? My sister recommended a place to us."
A spa, huh?
Spa is a place where we can heal our body and mind from the daily stresses at work. He seems to be busy, so I prepared a hotel reservation with the spa for him. And 1 week before the spa trip, "Liam, what time should we leave the house next week?"
Huh? Oh, is the spa trip next week? I forgot to mention, I have to go on a business trip during the next weekend.
"What? But you've known the spa trip for quite some time."
Well, it's work, so it can't be helped.
Right, I see. Liam's department seems to be as busy as ever with frequent business trips. It seems I had no choice but to give up this time as well.
Well, I'm off then.
As always, Liam left early in the morning for his business trip. If things had gone as planned, we would have been heading to the spa together by now. While I was feeling down like that, I got a phone call. A call was from the hotel where I had made a reservation. Despite having sent a cancellation email, it seems they did not receive it due to an error, and they called to confirm our arrival time. That's right, I might as well invite Kate. I called my parents' house, but it turned out Kate had been out since the morning and wouldn't be back home. So I decided to invite my mother to the spa as a last resort. Compared to my sister, I had half given up on the idea that my mother would be able to go on such short notice, but surprisingly, she agreed. Really? Is it okay to leave Dad alone?
Right now, I'm more worried about you than your father.
It seems she had noticed that I had been down lately and decided to accompany me on the trip. Thanks, Mom.
I'm the one who should be thanking you. I'm happy to be able to take a trip with just the two of us like this.
I decided to enjoy the trip with my mother, which I hadn't done in a long time. However, my mother and I witnessed something at the hotel when we arrived there. Mom, look at that! At the hotel was Liam, who was supposed to be on his business trip. He was arm in arm with a woman looking happy and entering the hotel where we were supposed to stay. The moment they entered the hotel, the woman who was with Liam turned her face in our direction for a moment. You've got to be kidding. The woman who was with Liam was my sister, Kate. After that, I was in a state of shock and don't remember much about how I got home. After drinking some tea my mother made for me, my feelings finally started to calm down. He had been deceiving me. Not just Liam, I had also been deceived by Kate. After calming down, I called Liam's department. As I had thought, his department had been trying to reduce their workload for the past few years. And they were not making the employees go on business trips, or even having the employees do any overtime as much as possible. When I told my mother about the days when Liam came home late, or the days he was on business trips, it seems that Kate was also not at home during those days, which was mentioned coincidentally. All those days when he came home late and going on business trips, it meant that he was meeting up with Kate, huh? When I learned the truth, what welled up inside me was anger rather than sadness. Mother, I'll divorce Liam. I don't want to see Kate, so I won't visit the house for a while. She kept silent and understood my feelings. I prepared everything right before Liam came back. I had prepared the divorce papers, made a new contract with a new house for me to live in, and packed up my belongings and already moved into an apartment where I can live before I officially move into a new house. I put the letter and the divorce papers for Liam at the house. All the details regarding alimony and such will be handled through the lawyer, as stated in the letter, and I blocked all his contacts. I didn't want Kate and Liam to know, so I didn't tell my parents about my new address. We worked in the same company, so we would pass each other occasionally, but I completely ignored him then. Perhaps realizing how utterly helpless the situation was, he immediately agreed to the divorce. He didn't tell anyone the reason for our divorce to our colleagues, but they seemed to have sensed about it from how I was being, and they decided not to touch on the subject about our divorce. And so, 3 years passed while I had some distance from him and from my family. After finishing work and returning to my room, I found my mother standing in front of me. Mom, what's wrong?
I have something I want to tell you.
My mother showed me an invitation. This? It's from Liam and Kate? It turns out that Kate left our family home and moved in with Liam. I had thought they might get married, but I never expected them to have a wedding ceremony and invite our parents. So, Mom, are you going?
Of course I am.
I see. I was the only one who couldn't forgive the two of them yet. Surely they must have known that, which was why they invited only our parents to the wedding. I had no right to say anything since I had become distant from both Liam and my parents. Seeing me depressed, my mother smiled and said,
"Don't worry. I'm not going to it because I forgive them. Just you wait and watch."
And on the day of the wedding, my mother called me through a video call. I don't want to see their faces. I was about to hang up the call, but I remembered my mother's words from earlier on and kept the call connected. The screen showed a slideshow that was being presented. The MC began introducing the slides.
This slideshow was made by the bride's mother. She gathered photos from her beloved daughter's birth to the present and created this slideshow.
I was surprised that my mother, who was not really good with technology, could create such a slideshow, and brought back a feeling of depression inside me. Mom, you do this much for Kate. But in the next moment, I was captivated by the screen. This isn't Kate. The slideshow started with a photo of me when I was born. So cute! There's a resemblance to Kate somehow. As the guests watched with a relaxed atmosphere, Kate's expression stiffened. The MC continued.
Since she was young, the bride has always been devoted to her family. She was a diligent student, succeeded in entering her desired university. After starting her job, she became a very reliable employee at the company.
Kate's friends and colleagues who knew about her student days and workplace began to buzz with excitement. Huh? Is that a photo from the welcome party at University J? Kate didn't go to such a good university, did she? Hey, isn't that a photo from the company's welcome party? Wait a minute. Looking closely, it's completely different. Wait, this isn't Kate? Liam also seemed to have noticed.
What the hell is this? This isn't Kate.
The MC, unaware of the bride and groom's pale faces, continued to advance the slides.
And then she met the groom, Liam, at the company. According to the bride's mother, she initially taught and trained the groom as his instructor. Then the two got married. Huh?
What followed were photos from my wedding with Liam. The MC couldn't hide their confusion. Realizing something was wrong, the MC got quiet. At that moment, my mother took the stage and grabbed the microphone.
From here on, I'll take over and explain.
She smoothly spoke while advancing the slides.
Even after marriage, my daughter supported him in both personal and professional aspects. However, due to how busy Liam got, he couldn't find any time for her. So, my daughter planned a spa trip to help relieve his stress. Wait, please!
Ignoring Kate's pale faces and his frantic attempts to stop her, my mother continued with the slides. The next photo showed the two entering the spa hotel together, being very close to each other. Finally, the bride and groom appeared in the photos, and both the MC and the guests finally got quiet at once. However, Liam and Kate continued to be even more pale.
But Liam declined the trip planned by my daughter due to a business trip. Since it couldn't be helped that he had to go on business trip for work, my daughter invited me to the spa trip, and that was where we witnessed his affair.
At these words, everyone started to talk and buzz about what had been said by my mother. Huh? An affair? This wedding is for Kate and Liam, right? Could it be that this wedding is based on their affair? But why would Kate's mother... To answer the guests' questions, my mother slowly continued.
Liam swore to marry my beloved daughter, Emma, and make her happy, but instead, he betrayed her. To make matters worse, he cheated on Emma with her own sister, Kate.
Mother, stop it already! Today is my wedding day. Why won't you celebrate my happiness? Kate cried as she tried to stop her mother. Still, my mother coldly looked at Kate and said, "I have always wished for your happiness, but you were the one who ruined it first."
That's...
Emma always considered not only herself, but also the happiness of her family. What about you, Kate? Have you ever thought about how much Emma would be hurt by your actions?
Well, it's just unfair that she always seems so happy. It's not fair.
So, instead of being happy for your family, you just got jealous, huh?
Mother-in-law, please stop. She is your precious daughter too, right? If that's the case, can't you celebrate our new beginning? Why are you doing this?
I don't want to become a family with someone as dishonest as you. I saw it clearly at today's ceremony. If you really intend to start something with Kate, why didn't you invite a single person from your own company? If you're going to have such a grand ceremony, shouldn't you apologize to Emma? It's selfish to invite me and her father to the wedding without making any effort like that.
But Emma has been ignoring me all this time.
Of course she has. After what you've done, it's only natural.
But that's all in the past, isn't it?
Do you think her wounds will heal in just 3 years? Do you think that you can regain our trust in such a short time? Don't be ridiculous. After those words, my mother angrily left the venue with my father. I can hear my mother's voice from the cell phone. "Did you see that, Emma?" "Yes." "I'm sorry for reminding you of painful things. I just can't stand seeing those two act like nothing happened." "No, thank you. I feel relieved. It's like you said everything I wanted to say." "That's right, Emma. You always keep everything to yourself. I thought it was just too kind of you to not tell your colleagues the reason for your divorce." After that, my mother sent me the recording of her conversation with Liam during the wedding. Indeed, as what my mother said, even if time passes, it's not easy to forget. Moreover, Liam showed no signs of remorse whatsoever, calling it a thing of the past. I decided to start my second life by giving Liam a proper punishment. I chose to punish him while he was doing a presentation at the company. It was open to volunteers from various departments, so I quickly signed up and entered the conference. When it was Liam's turn, his supervisor, unaware of his remarriage, said this.
"Liam, you seem even more motivated today because you just got married." "Yes, I will do my best for my family."
He also spoke happily. He should have known that I was in the room, but I became even more determined and played the recorded audio I received from my mother. The participants were surprised by the sudden noise coming from the recorded audio, but as they learned about his affair with my sister after marrying me, they began to accuse him.
"Liam, didn't you say that the reason for the divorce was a difference in values?"
I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Oh, really? Did you say something like that? Well, I can't also understand a value that involves cheating with your own wife's sister, though. Ha ha!" I apologize for mixing personal matters into this important internal presentation. I have decided to quit as of today. I have endured it because I like this company, but I cannot bear to be in the same place as him any longer. Just as I was about to leave, the board members intervened to stop me.
"Wait a minute, Emma. You're an essential asset to our company. If someone should leave, it should be Liam." "Huh? Me? But I've been expected to have a promising future." "We had expectations in the past, but lately you've been wearing worn-out clothes, and you're not focused. It seems like you've completely lost your problem-solving abilities that you had before. We're not expecting a lot out from you anymore."
Kate, who has always been bad at housework and did nothing even when she was living with her parents, became a full-time housewife after marriage, and apparently she left most of the house chores for Liam to do. Even when he faced difficulties at work, I couldn't give him advice like I used to, and he started causing more troubles at work. The fact that he had cheated on his wife's sister spread within the company, and his reputation went all downhill. At the board meeting, it was decided that I would remain at the company, and Liam would be transferred to a remote area as an employee who is to be laid off in the future. Kate, who had been enjoying her life as a housewife with his money, easily abandoned him once she found out, so she switched to another man. But it seems that the person she switched to was a typical freeloader. She's now suffering from his debts and desperately working 2 jobs all through day and night. As they say, what goes around comes around. If you do something wrong, it will come back to haunt you. Watching the 2 of them in such a state, I finally felt that I could start a new life.
We've been married for 3 years. My father-in-law, who was very kind to me, has passed away. After a long battle with illness, he passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family. Let's call Mom in. Yes, I agree. She's been having trouble with her legs and back, and since I work from home, I think I can provide a lot of support. We decided to invite my mother-in-law to live with us, and Liam conveyed this to the family before the funeral. But what are you saying? You're just after Mom's savings of $2 million, aren't you? But don't worry, we will live with her and take care of her. That's right. She wouldn't have to worry as much in her current home. Leave it to us. Sister-in-law's couple intervened in a rush and forcefully asserted that they would live with her. It's not about the money. We wouldn't say this because of Mom's money. It's up to Mom to decide, and I respect her decision. In response to Liam's question, the mother-in-law bowed her head and said, "Thank you. Your child is still small, so I'll stay at my current house." She said she'd rely on her daughter. I've never heard about the savings. The couple were treating us as if we were villains for proposing to living together, regardless of money. Maybe she's the one who wants to get money. In the car on the way home, Liam muttered this. I agree. I definitely have that feeling. When we have time, let's check on the mother-in-law. From then on, I visited her in my spare time, and I did my best to check on her, thinking that it would reassure Liam. However, within a few months, their attitude toward the mother-in-law dramatically changed. One day, when I visited during a break from work, sister-in-law was there. She was really there. Hello, Emma. How's Mom doing? She forcibly took the cake I had brought as a gift and checked its contents, and apparently satisfied with her, she abruptly told me to come in. Come in. So I entered the house. Oh, Emma, you've come to visit. I bought a cake that you like. Please have it later. Oh, thank you. Upon seeing my mother-in-law, I noticed that she was wearing the same clothes as yesterday. If laundry is difficult for you, I can take it home, dry it, and bring it back to you. Maybe you're having trouble doing housework because you are not physically well. I'm wondering that only their laundry is usually hung outside, and I'm worried she's losing weight. If she has 3 meals a day, it won't happen. I'm fine, Emma. Thank you. But she says she's fine. You're really persistent, coming every day. Sarah cut off my words and directed her eyes at her biological mother as if she were looking at something dirty. Sarah, you said we'd take care of Mom at the time, right? So what? Sure enough, at the time, she insisted. We will take care of her to reject our offer. But what on earth is happening with my mother-in-law's situation? Because Mom's savings have been used up to buy a new car. So now she's a poor old woman with no money. Do you understand? You were saying you wanted to call her in, right? Now it costs money for her now, so you don't need her anymore. What the hell saying like this? I feel guilty for not having taken my mother-in-law at the time. She is sitting behind me, looking uncomfortable. She's your real mother, talking about money all the time. It's astonishing that you can say such things after spending her savings. Please, choose your words carefully when you say you don't need her. Please think a little more about Mom. You're so annoying. She doesn't seem to be able to even have a discussion. Not wanting to cause any more discomfort, I called Liam to explain the situation, and we decided to have her come to our house from today. I hurriedly packed up her belongings, got her into the car, and headed for our house. Sister-in-law didn't even see us off, and my mother-in-law was surprised by my decisiveness throughout. After that, our life as a family of 4, including my mother-in-law, began. Emma, I'm sorry for being a burden on you. Especially when your child is still so small, and also you need to take care of me too. What are you talking about? Don't worry about it. We are family, aren't we? I smiled and replied. She accepted that I came from an orphanage and treated me well, like their own child. I felt so fresh and happy living with her. I'm happy living with you, and it's my first time raising a child. There are many things I don't know, so I wanted you to teach me. She smiled happily at my words. My husband too is delighted with the current situation, and most importantly, my mother-in-law seems to be happy living with her grandchild. However, our current situation as a couple is far from being wealthy. We were cutting back on living expenses and managing day by day. Of course, it's not all bad because I'm learning about saving techniques and I didn't want to rely too much on money for happiness. But I had a dream. I wanted to run a cafe someday. So, even as a student, I had a part-time job at a popular cafe. However, taking in my mother-in-law would mean postponing my dream. No, I didn't want to give up my dream because of my family. So, I dedicated myself to saving, working from home, raising my child, and taking care of daily household chores. One day, about 6 months after living with my mother-in-law, she called me in a serious tone. Emma, please come here. Yes, what is it? She handed me a thick envelope. This is your living expenses. Take it without saying anything. When I checked the contents, there were bundles of 100 bills. What? Huh? This? Money! I always save money. I rarely see bundles of bills. I could not say anything. Count it. There's $7,000, she said with a smile. Indeed, when I counted, there was exactly $7,000. I can't accept this much. I tried to refuse, but she interrupted me. I'm sorry for testing you. I was planning to see your financial sense for a year, but I didn't need to worry. By increasing the living for me, I caused you to endure a difficult life of strict saving. I didn't want to burden you anymore. Please accept it. I'll pay for living expenses. Is it all right for $2,000? I stared at my mother-in-law, dumbfounded. Oh no, I don't need $2,000. But why so much money? I was still a bit confused. She didn't have no idea with the lottery she won. She started studying investment. It was popular at that time. It turned out to be profitable. It seems that she actually has $80,000 in savings deposited in a bank passbook and stocks managed in a bank vault. My sister-in-law, aiming for his father's money, she prepared a dummy $20,000. She wanted to confirm if their financial sense was stable. When she had given them $200,000 as their future living expenses, they couldn't have lasted for a week. My mother-in-law sighed heavily. It seems that even my father-in-law, while he was alive, had been keenly aware of my sister-in-law and her husband's reckless spending. He had mentioned the possibility of cutting ties with them if they tried to monopolize his inheritance. She thought it might actually come true. But you two don't prioritize money that much. On that day when you took out, I was surprised, but really happy. That's why I want you to accept it. And I also want to help with your dream. Really? My mother-in-law seemed to have heard about my dream from my husband. But can I really take advantage of my mother-in-law's kindness? I discussed it with my husband, and we decided to save money for the future. When I told my mother-in-law about it, she nodded and agreed with understanding. A few days later, my sister-in-law and her husband, who suddenly visited, bugged Em, demanding to resume living with her. Fortunately, my husband had a day off, so he dealt with them, and they left without any trouble. However, I was concerned about them. My mother-in-law saw them and suggested that we should specify a day for them to come to us since they would probably come again soon. Later, my sister-in-law and her husband agreed to the proposal and visited my mother-in-law again on the specified day and time. Mom, pack up quickly. We're going home right now. Emma, I'll have a cold iced coffee, like the one they serve at hotels. They rudely entered the house without even greeting. But what awaited them was, "We've been waiting for you. Please have a seat." How dare you? Who are you? I'm Jung, an attorney. Huh? And so it turned out that my mother-in-law had hired a lawyer. We were in the next room, and we could easily imagine my sister-in-law and her husband showing signs of panic as we could hear the conversation. The lawyer explained the details of the request. We won't give away any of the current assets. They must repay the entire $2,000 they spent, and they have to leave the home they are occupying now. No way, ma'am. I'm your daughter. How can you cut off ties like that when your daughter is in trouble? My sister-in-law countered loudly. Mother-in-law, please reconsider. My brother-in-law raised his voice, an unusual sight. However, my mother-in-law remained unfazed and calmly spoke slowly. If that's the case, you don't even remember what you did to me. Did you forget I'm a penniless old woman? You said you didn't need money because I didn't. Despite having debts, you used the living expenses I gave you to buy a new car. And now I hear that your debts have more than doubled. You don't even know how to handle money. Don't borrow from others. Moving in with me at the family home was just an excuse because you couldn't afford the rent. It's your own doing. With my husband's inheritance issue, I'll also ask you to renounce your inheritance rights. I won't help you no matter what happens in the future. Keep that in mind. Unable to say anything, my sister-in-law and her husband left quietly, filled with despair after receiving an explanation from the lawyer. Fed up with her daughter and husband's refusal to the eviction order, she sold the family home. And now they were forced to leave, so no one knows where they are now. When I asked her if she had any regrets, despite being blood relatives, if you are a mother, it is sometimes necessary to let your child live alone. She replied with a clear expression. I didn't ask any further. As time passed, the amount we saved from the monthly living expenses grew larger. She once again, you can use that money for yourselves, she told us. After talking with my husband, we decided to use it for a family trip we had been sacrificing and the capital to open the cafe we had always dreamed of. Thanks to my mother-in-law's presence, we took a step toward our dream that we had been hesitant to pursue. There were many challenges leading up to the opening, but we managed to overcome them together. When the time for the grand opening approached, my husband quit his job at the wholesale company and assisted me in sourcing materials for the cafe, expediting the preparations. We bought and renovated the family home where my mother-in-law and father-in-law used to live, turning it into the cafe. It was my husband's wish to preserve the atmosphere of the building as a place of cherished memories for my mother-in-law and father-in-law. Although it took time to prepare the cafe, it became a beloved establishment in the community, a place for people to relax. I was surprised when my sister-in-law and her husband visited the cafe once, but they were much more humble compared to before. It seemed they had truly changed their ways. My husband and I smiled at each other. However, their purpose for visiting was to ask for money, so my husband scolded them and drove them away. It seems that since then, they have been working tirelessly to repair their debts without taking any breaks. My husband? Well, it seems those two need to struggle a bit more. My husband sighed in exasperation. Tears of joy filled my mother-in-law's eyes as the family home was reborn into a cafe, preserving the memories she had with my father-in-law. She became proactive in her rehabilitation, addressing her previously ailing legs and hips. When she felt confident in her physical condition, she put on the same apron as us and stood behind the counter, looking vibrant and alive. It felt as if my father-in-law captured in the photo was smiling at her. My name is Camilla, a 26-year-old housewife. I'm in my third year of marriage with no children. My husband's name is John. He's a company employee and 30 years old. My husband and I started dating after he approached me at the company where I was a receptionist, and we got married after 2 years of dating. Before marriage, there was no talk of living together with my in-laws, but as soon as the marriage was decided, my mother-in-law suggested that we will live together. I told my husband that I didn't want to live together while we were newlyweds, but he said, "You work at home, doing chores and errands, and I work at the company. That's rare." And he showed me his palm in front of my face, indicating that I shouldn't say anything more. I accepted living together and thought it might be inevitable as I was marrying the eldest son. Since the marriage was decided, we were supposed to go to the wedding venue together, but my mother-in-law always came with my husband. I felt uncomfortable with my mother-in-law, who even had a say in our wedding plan and my husband's outfit. I looked at my husband's face and wondered if I was marrying him or my mother-in-law, as he seemed to be excited about it. To be honest, my mood dropped at the thought of living with a mama's boy husband and mother-in-law. I'm the type of person who can't stand being in such a frustrated state, so I asked my husband when we were alone, John, are you by any chance a mama's boy? John asked back. Why do you think so? With a curious look. I told my husband, usually, the two of us should decide on the wedding plan. I've never heard of our mother coming along and having a say. My husband said, I just came along because I had time before my mother's errand. And it's not interference, it's just advice. So don't worry about it. And I'm not a mama's boy, he replied. When he asked, what would you do if I was a mama's boy? I answered, I wouldn't get married. It would only feel like being in enemy territory, wouldn't it? We'd better call off the wedding now, for our future's sake. I answered honestly. My husband said, I'm not a mama's boy, and if my mother does something to Camilla, I'll protect you, with a laugh. So I decided to believe him and get married. After that day, my mother-in-law stopped coming to the wedding venue. We finished our wedding ceremony, moved our belongings into our room at my in-laws' house, and departed for our honeymoon. Upon our return, I found our room had been tidied up and the luggage had been unpacked. I was surprised to find that furniture, including a bed, had already been set up, as I was planning to organize them later. Everything, down to the curtains, was in place, ready for immediate living. I couldn't find my belongings, so I asked my husband. He replied, You'd have to ask my mom. So I went down to the first floor to ask my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, thank you for tidying up the luggage, but I can't find my belongings. When I asked, she said, Oh, your things? I threw away what we didn't need. There were valuables like my bank book and personal seal. Oh, don't worry. I'm keeping those. I threw everything else away. I was taken back and said, Those are my personal belongings. Please return them to me. My bank book and seal are my personal items from before I got married, I said with my hand gesture. My mother-in-law frowned and said, Are you defying me as a daughter-in-law? Fine, I'll give you back your bank book and seal. Wait here. She stomped off to fetch them. When she returned, she tossed the bank book and seal onto the floor. I hurriedly checked inside and found that $1 million had been withdrawn. Mother-in-law, did you withdraw $1 million? I asked, to which she replied without any remorse. Of course, I bought you furniture. I was speechless. I immediately returned to our room and angrily told my husband what had happened. My husband responded, Oh, she bought us this furniture? Thanks. Which infuriated me. Wait a minute. It's a crime to use my savings without permission. Moreover, she chose such bad tasting furniture and curtains. Who wouldn't be angry about this? Seeing how angry I was, my husband said, I'll go talk to my mother, and went to her. I regretted my decision to live together, fearing what the future would bring. Looking around, I saw curtains filled with large roses on a pink background, a cheap-looking wardrobe reminiscent of my childhood. Everything I looked at made me sigh. The bed covers on the bed I lay down on, exhausted, had a cherry pattern. I wasn't sure if it was a form of harassment or a kind thought, but seeing them made me feel sad. As I was thinking this, my husband returned from his mother's room. Mom's so angry, I couldn't talk to her. She said no other mother-in-law would do as much as she has. She did it out of kindness, she said, and doesn't deserve to be complained about. I, astounded, asked my husband, Don't you feel sad looking at this furniture, these curtains, these bed covers? He looked around, his face turning pale. Maybe we can slowly change these things without my mom noticing, he said, trying to appease me. What about the money? Will the money be returned? I asked, as I did not work hard and save to spend money on such frivolous things. He apologized on behalf of his mother and promised to repay me little by little from his salary and bonuses. I apologized to my husband for fighting with my mother-in-law on the first day of living together, told him that I would apologize to her reluctantly, and headed to her room. When I apologized to my mother-in-law, saying, I'm sorry for speaking out of turn earlier, she said. You are the type of person who wants to complain even about small things. But remember, you won't get off lightly if you defy me again. She seemed to forgive me for this incident. The next morning, I was woken up by my mother-in-law at 4 a.m. She told me to go to the bakery in the neighboring town, which opens at 5 a.m. to buy bread. Given what had happened the day before, I replied yes and decided to head to the bakery. I wanted to take my bike, but I couldn't find the key. Thinking that the key might be on the bike, I went outside, but the bike wasn't where I had left it when we moved in. I assumed the bike had probably been thrown away too. I decided to run to the store for some healthy exercise. I changed into my running shoes and started jogging through the morning town, listening to my favorite songs on my headphones. It felt wonderful. When I returned after buying bread and tried to take a shower, my mother-in-law stopped me. You don't work, so no wasteful spending. Just use a towel if you sweat, she said, throwing a towel at me. I thought she must still be upset about yesterday and gave up on taking a shower. I prepared breakfast for my parents-in-law and husband, consulting the contents of the fridge. Since I enjoy cooking, I can decide on the menu just by looking at the ingredients in the fridge. Although the ingredients were limited, I was able to prepare breakfast, so I woke up my husband and informed my in-laws that breakfast was ready. When my parents-in-laws and husband sat down at the table, I was about to join them when my mother-in-law said, You can't eat with us. You are the daughter-in-law, right? You should eat after we're done cleaning up. And she didn't let me have a seat at the table. I looked at my husband's face, but he pretended not to notice and didn't look at me. Are the rules of this house from the early 1900s? I thought, but still followed my mother-in-law's orders. When my husband left, he mouthed sorry to me, put his hands together and bowed. I couldn't help but chuckle a little. Then I thought, I need to make this a home my husband wants to return to, even if he doesn't show much consideration. I told my mother-in-law I'll start with cleaning and began to clean. She was sitting on the sofa, glanced at me, but didn't reply. Since she was there, I left the living room cleaning until last, and in the meantime, I was busy with laundry and cleaning. Finally, only the living room was left to clean, but when I went there, my mother-in-law was not there. When I finished cleaning and was about to have tea, I noticed that the small window next to the fridge was open and I could hear my mother-in-law's voice. It seemed like she was having a conversation with a neighbor. As I was casually drinking my tea and listening to their conversation, it seemed like they were talking about me. She was saying that I had taken her bank book and she didn't have any money to spend freely. Unable to stand it, I confronted my mother-in-law when she came in and said, Please don't lie to the neighbors. When did I ever take your bank book? My mother-in-law quickly shut the small window next to the fridge, shouting, Just do whatever you want, before storming off to her bedroom. I decided to make an effort to bridge the gap with her from now on, as I didn't want my husband to be stuck uncomfortably between her and me. However, she treated me as if I were not there. Even when I tried to talk to her, she ignored me as if I were invisible. My father-in-law also existed like thin air, unable to oppose his assertive wife. He is a quiet man who runs an animal hospital but has slowly started to talk with me. After a while, I was able to have a long conversation with my father-in-law on a Wednesday, the day his clinic was closed. I've been told by her that it's okay to divorce, he confessed. I responded with a laugh. She's not serious. If she's still with you, perhaps she's testing your love. You are loved, aren't you? We ended up sharing our complaints with each other in a light-hearted way. It felt like I had an ally behind the scenes, and my father-in-law was my only solace. Thanks to him, I never complained about my mother-in-law to my husband. My mother-in-law, however, seemed to be venting about me to my husband. Whenever I heard these complaints from my husband, I would say, "I'm sorry, I'll be careful," to reassure him. No matter how much I was ignored by my mother-in-law, I persisted in my household duties without cutting corners. Still, she continued to treat me as if I were here. I was also getting along well with the neighbors. Amidst all this, my husband's work became busier, and he had to travel more often. When my husband was away on business trips, the prospect of spending more time alone with my mother-in-law was depressing. During the occasional phone calls from my husband, I reassured him that I was getting along peacefully with his mother. I genuinely wished that one day I could get along with her. So even though I was treated like air, I never stopped trying to engage her in conversation. I believed that the only way to build a good relation with her was to show her who I was going to be. So I pushed myself to do my best in everything. I had been getting up early and running to the bakery since the first day of our marriage. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since our wedding. My mother-in-law continued to treat me and my father-in-law as if we were air, and I kept talking to him whenever she wasn't around. Then, one day, my father-in-law spoke to me with a serious face.
"Your mother-in-law is supposed to go on a trip soon,"
he said.
"Depending on the outcome, I might leave this house."
I tried to ask him what he meant, but he simply replied,
"I can't tell you now,"
and left it at that. I felt so sad at the thought of him leaving that I started crying. He was the only one who was on my side in his family, who comforted me and who listened to my complaints.
"Maybe you should leave this house too,"
he suggested, looking at me in the eyes. I asked him what he meant, but all he said was,
"I can't tell you yet."
No matter how many times I asked, he stubbornly refused to tell me, simply saying,
"I promise, I'll tell you when the time comes, so please wait a little longer."
So I decided to trust him and wait until he was ready to talk. Then, the day when my husband would return home from his 2-month-long business trip was decided. It had been a long business trip, but I was glad to think that we would finally be able to live together again. The night before his return, I received a phone call from my husband. I immediately picked up the phone. Then, it wasn't my husband on the line, but a woman with a sweet voice.
Nice to meet you. Are you John's wife?
If by John you mean my husband, yes, I answered, to which she cheerfully responded,
Yes, that's right, John. I'm Olivia, John's girlfriend. I'll give him back to you tomorrow, okay?
What exactly is your relationship with him? Could you please explain it again?
Like I just told you, I'm his girlfriend.
So, you're the other woman he's seeing?
No, I'm his girlfriend, and we're planning to get married.
Olivia, the woman on the other end of the line, answered with a hint of annoyance. Whether it was due to her being drunk or just her personality, I couldn't tell, but her way of thinking seemed immature. I see. How did you meet?
I'm a temporary worker at John's company.
Every time she spoke, she laughed. I had an intuition that this Olivia would say anything if provoked, so I decided to egg her on. My husband John has been out of your care. He's told me he won't be going on business trips anymore. So I'm looking forward to our married life together.
No more business trips? John told you that?
Yes, we're talking about a child recently. We've been discussing it together. Oh, how embarrassing.
That can't be true. I'm pregnant with his child.
I was taken aback upon hearing that Olivia was pregnant with my husband's child.
You know, your mother-in-law doesn't even recognize you as her daughter-in-law, right? Why don't you just get a divorce?
Hearing Olivia mention my mother-in-law, I snapped back to my reality. Did my mother-in-law say something like that? Oh dear. I laughed off the question, not knowing how to respond to the topic of my mother-in-law. Olivia, perhaps feeling mocked, retorted angrily. Have you ever been on a trip with your mother-in-law? I have, and it was fun. The four of us. At this, she sent a photo via line. Looking at it, I saw my husband and mother-in-law in special clothing for vacation. A woman who appeared to be Olivia and a man around my husband's age. When I asked, "Who is this man?" she replied, "Oh, I can't tell you that. We all have our little secrets, you know. Hey, are you jealous? Are you jealous that I'm close with John, your mother-in-law?" I thought to myself, these people are disgusting. So, you just happened to meet on vacation, right? I'm not jealous at all. We are a married couple after all. Olivia sent me dozens of photos of her and my husband without saying a word. I immediately saved them all. Among them were a few photos of my mother-in-law and a man looking intimate. This is hardly proof of an affair, I said. My husband would never betray me. Well, thank you for your time, I said, pretending to end the call. Wait a minute. I'll show you more proof. Just wait. I waited in silence. Then she sent me screenshots of her line conversations with my husband. There were several of them, and I saved all of them. Then I said goodbye and hung up. As soon as I hung up, I burst into tears. Despite my belief in him, despite thinking I was loved, despite believing he was on my side, despite my love for him, a surge of emotions overwhelmed me. The confident me, who had been provoking Olivia just a while ago, was gone. I rushed out of the house and headed for my father's workplace. I flung open the door to his office and asked tearfully, "Where is my dad?" It seemed he was busy, so I waited alone in the waiting room, crying. After a while, my dad came to see me during his break. I immediately apologized to him for my sudden arrival and told him everything. My father said,
You are like me. You can't stand injustice.
and with a smile, he added,
You know that crying won't solve anything, right?
These were his words that, since my childhood, had always encouraged me to move forward after I had finished crying. I showed him the screenshots of the conversation and the photos I received from Olivia. My father, looking at them, exclaimed,
What the hell are these?
When I peeked at the screen of my smartphone that my father was looking at, I saw a picture of my mother-in-law and a man beside her. My father expressed his wish to talk to my father-in-law. As it turns out, my father is a lawyer. He appeared to be quietly angry, which is not like his usual calm self. When I returned to my house and told my father-in-law that my father wished to speak with him, he went into his bedroom and seemed to make a call. After the call, my father-in-law informed me,
I'll be meeting with Camilla's father.
The next day, I greeted my husband, who returned from a business trip with an unassuming face. My husband probably hadn't heard anything from Olivia because there was no change in his behavior. My mother-in-law returned a little later from her trip. I'm tired, but it was fun, she said, handing me souvenirs from the same area where my husband had been. And as always, the three of them ate the food I had prepared, excluding me. As I quietly observed this scene, my husband spoke to me.
Camilla, the atmosphere seems to have changed while I was away. You seem cooler,
he said. Immediately, my mother-in-law chimed in. Maybe she's sulking because you were away on business and she wanted your attention, she tossed out without even looking at me. I was about to say something unnecessary, so while I nodded with a smile, I was trembling with anger. My father-in-law made eye contact with me and,
Calm down.
I nodded, took a deep breath, and suppressed my emotions. Then my mother-in-law started saying things that disrupted my attempt to stay calm.
You've been living with your father for a while, haven't you?
She asked.
Something happened, didn't it? I can tell. Don't hide it. Tell me.
She said, insinuating there was something more than just a normal parent-child relationship between my father-in-law and me. What do you mean by something happened? I asked, suppressing my anger.
A relationship between a man and a woman, right? It happened, didn't it?
She repeated. That's impossible, I retorted, my voice trembling. Normally a quiet man, my father-in-law said with a stern face.
Did you go on a trip hoping that Camilla would get into a relationship with me?
He stared at her as he said this. If nothing happened, you wouldn't be angry, right? So are you admitting it? She asked. My father-in-law replied.
I despise you. I truly despise you. I can't forgive you as a person.
He then got up from his seat and left, saying,
I'll be at the clinic for a while. Don't contact me.
My father-in-law said to me, half smiling, You can leave too, you know. I stared at my husband. My husband glanced at me with fearful eyes, sensing my stance. Seeing this, my mother-in-law said, What? Do you have a problem with John? You're so arrogant. That's why I don't want to talk to you. You should go to your father's annual clinic too. Trying to force me out. My husband did nothing to stop her. I asked my husband, John, don't you have anything to say? This is the exact situation I talked about before we got married, isn't it? What happened to I'll protect Mila if my mom does anything to you? I said I wanted to reconsider our marriage because I didn't want this to happen. But you stopped me. My husband seemed surprised that I was angry. Upon saying this, my mother-in-law said, Well then, you should break up. Get out. I asked my husband, Is that okay with you? But he didn't answer and just held his head in his hands. It means you should leave. Joe is just too kind to say it, she said. I stared at my husband and asked one last time, Is that okay? No response means it's okay, right? My husband said, I need to think. Give me time. And then he went to take a bath. That night, I didn't wash the dishes, didn't take a bath, and just went to sleep in the bedroom. The next morning, I got up earlier than anyone else, didn't make breakfast, and headed to my parents' house. After arriving at my parents' house, I used my spare key to get inside and took a shower. My mother woke up when she heard a sound and seemed surprised to see me in the room. My father also woke up, and when he saw my face, he said,
Good morning,
and went into his study. When my father came out of the study, he handed me an envelope. I looked inside. As I looked at the contents, I told my parents that my mother-in-law had told me to leave and that my husband hadn't responded. After looking at the contents of the envelope, I asked my parents, I can't be with my husband anymore. Can I come home? My parents smiled, nodded, and said, Come home. I bowed silently and looked up. Seeing my face, my father said,
Calm down. Your face looks like a demon's,
and patted my shoulder. I think I had turned into a vengeful demon after looking at the documents in the envelope. I think it was because my husband's betrayal, the unwarranted harassment, and verbal abuse from my mother-in-law was swirling in my head with images. I started to feel a strange sense of enjoyment in this situation as I took deep breaths and said, This is going to be the ultimate revenge. In the afternoon, my father and I went to my father-in-law's annual clinic, which was closed for the day. When my father-in-law saw me, he called out to me.
Are you okay, Camilla?
He asked. worrying whether I had been able to sleep or eat. I just answered, "I'm fine." Seeing my face, he smiled and seemed relieved. From there, my father, who is a lawyer, and my father-in-law and I had a discussion. And we decided to take action the next day. First, I called my husband during his lunch break and we agreed to meet at a dinner after work. My husband arrived at the seat where I was waiting, panting. "Why didn't you answer the phone even though I called many times? Where were you? What happened?" He bombarded me with questions. I took deep breaths as my father had told me, trying to stay calm. "I'm sorry for leaving without telling you. I was just wandering around town. You should know what happened better than anyone else," I said, pretending to be a brave woman with a smile, even as my eyes welled up with tears. Today, I needed to act like a great actress towards my husband. I pretended to hold back tears, turned my back, and dropped eye drops in one eye. My husband misunderstood and thought I was crying for him, murmuring, "Sorry." When he thought he had a message from me, who had left home and opened our group chat, he seemed to think I've been caught because there was a call history and many photos that I got from Olivia. With a very flustered expression, my husband said, "I did meet her, but nothing happened. I only love you, Camilla. If you are angry that we met, I won't do it anymore. Please forgive me." A storm of lies and apologies. I brushed off my husband's hand, trying to hold mine, and said, "I love you too, but..." Holding the handkerchief to my eye, pretending to cry, my voice trembling, I said a little excitedly after saying, "Olivia has your child in her belly, doesn't she?" Then I said it quietly, "Don't make the child suffer. This is my last request." And I fully played the part of a brave woman who loves her husband but steps back because his mistress is pregnant. My husband apologized many times, saying, "I'm sorry," and, "But I only love you, Camilla. That will never change," crying and spouting cheesy lines. He seemed to feel more guilty than necessary and said he would give me all his savings and also pay me $2 million in damages. It seems his intention is to make sure I don't suffer even if we divorce. I called my dad, had him fill out and stamp the divorce papers, and after drafting the pledge, had him stamp that as well. My husband apologized to my father, but my father said, "My daughter has been a burden," and left the diner with me. I headed straight to my in-laws' house and packed my things. Most of it had been thrown away by my mother-in-law, so all I had was one large bag. My mother-in-law came and asked with a half smile, "Finished moving?" So I said, "I'm leaving now. Thank you for everything," and headed lightly to my parents' home. As I was unpacking and tidying up at home, my cell phone rang with a phone call again. I had a hunch it was a gloating call from Olivia. Sure enough, the call was from Olivia.
How does it feel? Loser? Ex-wife? I'm on top of the world. There's no one I can't have, right?
She began with predictable gloating. I calmly said, "I'm glad for you. Best of luck."
You told him I love you, didn't you? Unrequited love, huh? Good for you.
"I'm hurt. I think a letter will arrive for you, Olivia, later. Please take care of it," I said and hung up the phone. As I thought about what would happen next, I was excited. I couldn't wait to see the final state of the scenario my father had thought up. A few days later, I received a payment for damages from my ex-husband and Olivia. Normally, this would be the end, but in my case, it wasn't. A few months later, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. I got a frantic phone call from my mother-in-law. "Because of you, the house is in chaos. Come back and do something about it." "And what's this certified mail about?" Pretending to know nothing, I said, "I haven't done anything. What happened? Please tell me calmly." My mother-in-law was in a panic and couldn't calm down. "If you can't talk, I'm going to hang up. We're strangers now," I said, and she started to explain one by one after saying, "Wait, wait. First of all, my husband and Olivia got married last month. However, Olivia already had 4 children and moved into my in-laws' house with them. Apparently, the house was in chaos because of the undisciplined children and Olivia, who did not do housework or take care of her children. My ex-husband was in a panic saying, 'I didn't know she had 4 children.' The damages to me were reluctantly paid by my mother-in-law, who was looking forward to having a grandchild. After Olivia said, 'I'm going to give birth to your grandchild, so you pay instead.' Next is a certified mail from me to my mother-in-law. This was a certified mail about the repayment of the $1 million she had used from my savings without permission. When I asked my father, 'Aren't we family? Can't we sue?' he smiled and said, 'Anyone can sue.' My mother-in-law was scared by the certified mail and said, 'I'll pay, so don't sue.' I agreed, saying, 'If you will return it.' I was also able to hear about Olivia's situation. Apparently, my ex-husband was going crazy because he said in front of Olivia that he wished he hadn't cheated and wanted to get back with me. My ex-husband, crying out my name, his hysterical wife, and their unruly children had my mother-in-law saying, 'I'm going to lose my mind.' In the end, she told me that she had received a divorce notice from my father-in-law and was also being asked to pay damages for the affair. My father, who found out that he was my father-in-law's lawyer, tried to persuade me to somehow stop the divorce. Upon hearing the current situation of my in-laws' house, I realized that things had ended just as my father's scenario had predicted. Both my father and I, as well as my father-in-law, knew from the reports from the detective agency that Olivia had 4 children. Moreover, my ex-husband may not know this, but there is a possibility that the child in Olivia's belly is from a colleague of my ex-husband, who she was seeing at the same time. Olivia's parents were taking care of the 4 children, but when they found out about her marriage to my ex-husband, they told her to take the children with her. In addition, they disowned Olivia when they found out about the affair. Therefore, no matter what happens, Olivia will cling to her in-laws' house. It seems that the time has come for me to deliver the final line of the scenario. You all reap what you sow. Goodbye, I said, and was able to end everything by blocking and rejecting incoming calls. After that, I found a job and started living alone near my parents' house. My father-in-law expanded his veterinary clinic and turned it into a residence. I was impressed by his words when I went to check on him. "I might be happier with animals as my family," he said, seeming to live happily with his newly adopted corgi. Seeing the pitiful endings of my mother-in-law, ex-husband, and Olivia made me realize that I should be nice to